Hi guys, Emmy Darkman here. Today, we're diving into the exciting world of one of the most iconic figures in electronic dance music, the one and only deadmau5. Known for his signature mouse-shaped helmet and groundbreaking productions, deadmau5 has become a trailblazer in the EDM scene, leaving an indelible mark on the industry. From his chart-topping hits to his unique approach to live performances, there's so much to explore about the man behind the mouse head. In terms of his music, deadmau5 is perhaps best known for tracks such as Ghosts and Stuff, Strobe, I Remember, and The Veldt. However, what not a lot of people realise is that deadmau5 has a, shall we say, large discography. And when I say large, I mean very large. This shared document that aims to track all of deadmau5's songs lists a total of 1,124 different tracks, and that doesn't even include certain unreleased tracks. Over his almost 30 years of producing music, deadmau5 has diligently released albums and albums of some of the best electronic music there is. He's released music on mouse-shaped USBs. He's released an album that was only available in Japan. He's released a vinyl-only EP that was only available in Spain. He's released music on a bonus CD that was only available in Australia. He's had albums released that he didn't authorise but couldn't legally stop. He's released music on rare demo CDs, of which only 500 exist. He's released music on a subscription-only website which no longer exists, and some of which may now be lost media. He's even released music on LimeWire. No, I'm not kidding. However, none of these compare to the most infamous, the most rare, and in my opinion, the most iconic release he has ever done. This release is so iconic because, well, it is the first release he ever did. This is where the magic started. There is nothing before this. This release is the bookend to one of the most successful electronic careers the world has ever seen. This fact alone would make the release notable in itself, but even more crazy is the fact that this release is extremely rare. At present, a mere 30 people claim to own this record on Discogs. There is only a single copy listed for sale right now, and the asking price is a whopping €3,000 or $3,200. This vinyl is so rare that I could only ever dream of owning something like, oh, what's this? My friends, it is time to tell the story of the first record deadmau5 ever released, and how I was fortunate enough to come into possession of this holy grail of deadmau5 records. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the story of the infamous Dred and Karma vinyl record. Our story begins in 2013 on a website called Random Forum Title. While this website no longer exists anymore, in the early 2010s, Random Forum Title was the largest and most prominent deadmau5 fan site on the internet. On the 23rd of January 2013, a user named Zaffer would make a thread called Dred and Karma. Unfortunately, this thread has not been archived, but as I was around at the time, I can summarise the thread. Zaffer had noticed that, on Discogs, a website for tracking music releases, someone had created a rather mysterious entry. The entry was for a vinyl record release called I Don't Want No Other. The vinyl contained two tracks, one called I Don't Want No Other, and the other called Suck This. The release year was not known. The artist behind the release was listed as Dred and Karma, an artist that Discogs tracked no other known releases for. The label that released the record, etched into the runout of the vinyl, was Awesome Records, and this label did not seem to be associated with any known labels under that name. However, there were a few clues as to who the artist behind this release actually was. Firstly, the artwork on the release was extremely similar to the iconic mouse head deadmau5 fans are familiar with today. It was almost as if the artwork was a prototype mouse head. While strong evidence that this was a deadmau5 release, it was not conclusive. However, fans quickly made an interesting discovery. In 2006, under the alias Halcyon441, deadmau5 had self-released a compilation album titled deadmau5 circa 1998 to 2002 on a website known as Section Z. Not only was this release one of deadmau5's earliest known releases, but as the title implied, This album contained tracks dating all the way back to 1998. This album therefore contained some of deadmau5's earliest known music, some tracks even being produced while he was only 17 years of age. On this release, at track 10, we find a familiar song, a French house song called I Don't Want No Other. Upon discovering this, fans became increasingly convinced that this Dred and Karma record might be a very early deadmau5 release. However, the only way to confirm this definitively would be to obtain this release and compare the I Don't Want No Other song to the version from the 2006 compilation album. But how would fans even go about obtaining this record, a record so obscure that it only got catalogued on Discogs months earlier? Well, there was a reason it even got catalogued in the first place, and that reason was because someone was trying to use the Discogs marketplace to sell copies of the record. Obtaining the record was about to prove far easier than anyone could have ever imagined. The user who had populated the Discogs entry, a user named Richgatkow, immediately listed a number of copies for sale. Interestingly, he hadn't just listed one copy, he seemed to have quite a few of them. While there was still no definitive link between this release and deadmau5, many members on the random forum titled website did not want to miss a chance to potentially own a piece of deadmau5 history. The OP of the thread, Zaffer, ordered one, many others in the thread followed suit. And yes, as I hinted at earlier, your boy managed to snag one himself too. Here's my copy of the record in its full glory, and in pretty much the exact same condition as when I bought it over 10 years ago. It came in a plain black sleeve, completely unmarked except for a small price tag sticker with a price of $1. If you know the value of this record now, you'll find this quite humorous. The record itself comes in a plastic sleeve. There's not much to say about the record itself, it's pretty much just a standard 12-inch vinyl record. However, it has a playback speed of 45 RPM rather than the 33 RPM typical of a record this size. Additionally, you can see the awesome records etching in the runout. Anyway, back to our story. After ordering my record, I decided to message Richgatkow with a couple of important questions. I sent him the following message. Hi, I noticed you are the only seller of this item, as well as the person who created the Discogs page, and I'm finding it difficult to find information on this release. If you have time, could you explain the history behind this item, such as where you obtained it? Richgatkow replied hours later with the following. Hi Nick. You are one of quite a few people to ask actually, and especially in the last 2 weeks or so, which is weird. Has deadmau5 recently been to Australia and mentioned it somewhere? I've just sent 3 copies to 3 different Australian addresses. Anyway, I was a buyer at Nice Music, which was Canada's biggest dance vinyl distributor. After that closed, I bought up a large part of their unsold stock to sell on Discogs, including the Dred and Karma 12-inch. I hadn't bought that one into the company and had no idea what it was, but the deadmau5 logo made it obvious. There was no listing for it on Discogs, so I created it myself, and after doing a little searching online, I found that it was actually a very early deadmau5 release. You can hear the A side online, but the B side is hard to track down, making it interesting for collectors. Thanks. This reply gave us some much needed context. Richgatkow had acquired these from a vinyl distributor. Who knows how long these records had been sitting in some warehouse. This made it very hard to believe that these were simply bootleg records. The location of Canada also lines up with deadmau5's nationality, as well as where he would have been based at this time. Richgatkow also confirmed that he has compared the I Don't Want No Other track to the version available online, and that they were the same. As many others would confirm when they received their records, he was correct. It was now all but confirmed that this was a very early and extremely obscure, potentially unreleased record. This rarity had obviously caught my interest, so I decided to ask Richgatkow one more question. How many of these records do you have for sale, and have sold in the past? I was just curious. I understand if you can't share. Richgatkow would reply, I've sold 5 in the past, but I have no idea how many more I still have, as I still have many boxes in storage. So, there are at least 5 copies that Richgatkow had sold at this point in time, but he seemed to have many more in his possession. To this day, exactly 30 people have placed the item in their collection on Discogs. While this doesn't necessarily include every owner, it's definitely safe to say that this is an incredibly rare item. Richgatkow stopped selling them very shortly after 2013, so please don't message him asking for one, and almost every copy listed for sale since then seems to be from his original sell-off. Now that many people had the record in hand, there were two main goals. First was to find out as much information as we could about this record. People not only wanted to 100% confirm its authenticity, but also find out more about the history of the release too. And secondly, there was the mysterious allure of that second track. This record seemed to be the sole source of this track, a track no one had ever heard before. Who would be the first to share it publicly? That question would be answered very quickly in February of 2013. One of the random forum title users who purchased the vinyl, Zaffer, would almost immediately rip his vinyl after receiving it and upload it to YouTube. For the first time in about 13 years, fans could finally listen to Suck This. Fans were ecstatic. Unlike the song on the other side of the vinyl, this was a track that basically no one had ever heard before. Fans immediately began sharing this video around and bopping to deadmau5's first known release song. Despite the excitement, however, there was still one small problem. Zaffer had only posted a YouTube video. He hadn't shared a download link to the song. Sure, users could just rip an MP3 from the video, and many did, but it wasn't exactly a high-quality lossless WAV file. It seemed like the task of making a fully lossless rip of the song would fall to someone else who had purchased one of the records. And the next person to try would be, well, yours truly. In March of 2014, I would visit my local record store and pay them a small fee to rip both tracks of the vinyl to lossless WAV files. I did this because I didn't exactly have a great turntable or the equipment to do it myself, and I figured they've probably done it before, so they likely knew what they were doing. I would upload both of the files onto YouTube, as well as provide the files for download. However, over the years, I would start to get comments about the files I had offered for download. Apparently, people thought that they weren't actually true WAVs, as the quality was similar to that of an upscaled MP3. At first, I had thought that maybe there had been an issue when I had ripped the tracks from the CD the record store had provided me. However, it would become apparent that the actual ripping process had likely been done incorrectly. This was extremely disappointing, as not only had I paid this store specifically so that the ripping could be done properly, but there were no other stores around me offering a similar service, and I still didn't have the equipment to do it myself. Unfortunately, I had failed in my endeavour to rip the WAV file, and it would unfortunately remain this way for many years. We'll come back to the story of the WAV files a bit later, but for now, let's switch back to talk about the history of the record and the discovery of its origin story. What's quite interesting about the vinyl itself is that, even in the wake of its discovery, deadmau5, who is a very active online user and very frequently interacts with his fans, never directly addressed the record or its discovery. Instead, little tidbits of information would slowly trickle out over the next decade. I'll cover some of these discoveries in a chronological order. In early 2013, out of the blue, deadmau5 would remix I Don't Want No Other on a live stream. This remix was never released, and never seen again outside this stream, but viewers did clip the remix from the live stream. Unfortunately, this remix only survives as a YouTube upload, and very little is known about this particular remix. It was likely done on Ustream, a platform deadmau5 used to stream on around 2013, but that's about all we know. In July of 2013, deadmau5 would share the following picture on Instagram. It was a photo of an old flyer for a DJ event in Niagara Falls, Canada. deadmau5 had added the caption, "Before mouse, it was house arrest." On the flyer, we see two familiar items. A reference to DJ Funky Dred, clearly the same Dred from the Dred and Karma name, and also the name House Arrest in front of that iconic prototype mouse head we see on the vinyl record. However, it's not really clear who's who here. deadmau5 is clearly House Arrest, but is he DJ Funky Dred too? Or is that someone different? And where does Karma fit into all of this? This post raised more questions than it answered, and we'd have to wait a little longer to get more answers. In December 2013, deadmau5 would launch his infamous Suckscription service. This was a service where users could pay $4.99 a month to get access to exclusive deadmau5 videos, updates, and perhaps most importantly, music. deadmau5 would upload early demos of tracks, work-in-progress songs, and sometimes even rare unreleased tracks. On the 16th of January 2014, something rather unusual would happen. deadmau5 would upload a track called Suck This. The song had a description of the following: "Probably my first ever polished track, if you even want to call it that." At the same time, he would also tweet, "Just uploaded the first track I ever finish on live.deadmau5.com. It's embarrassing really. Suck this." The song, while similar to the version from the vinyl in a small number of ways, was largely a completely different track. Now, there's a few possibilities here. One is that this is an early version of the track from the vinyl. However, at least to my untrained ear, this song seems a lot more detailed and well produced than the version on the vinyl. So, another possibility is that this is an improved version from the one on the vinyl. However, that would mean deadmau5 put out an earlier, supposedly unfinished version as the vinyl release. That being said, deadmau5 is known to randomly revisit old tracks of his. And finally, it could just be a completely new song, as deadmau5 is also known to reuse track names on occasion. Unfortunately, deadmau5 has never commented on this, so we simply don't know the history of these two versions. In January 2015, a website known as the Toronto Rave Collective would write an article about a record store called Play de Record in Toronto, Canada. The article was called "Unearthing First Ever deadmau5 Tracks Pressed on Vinyl at Play de Record." This article not only came completely out of nowhere, but shared some never before known details about the Dred and Karma release. This article revealed that the vinyl was created by the owner of the record store, a man named Eugene Tam, who knew deadmau5 from his earliest days as a producer. We also discover that Karma is deadmau5, and Dred is a DJ from Niagara Falls called Derek Caesar. This finally confirms that the Dred and Karma name isn't another alias of deadmau5's, but rather a collaboration project between him and another DJ. We learn that Awesome Records, the elusive record label printed on the vinyl, was the first label ever created by Eugene Tam. And finally, we learn that at some point several years after the fact, deadmau5 went to go and visit Eugene at the store, at which point Eugene gave deadmau5 a copy of the record because, quote, "The vinyl hadn't even made it into the rodent-themed DJ's hands. He didn't even have one, so I gave him one." This just goes to show how rare this record really is. deadmau5 himself for many years didn't even own a copy. Finally, with the release of this article by this local Toronto news source, we were finally starting to piece together the history of this elusive record. By the way, this article was really hard to find. I remember reading it when it first came out, but since then, it appeared to have completely vanished from the internet. I was even beginning to think I imagined it, until I watched a 2019 video that fellow YouTuber PeterTrinkilo made about this same record, where he included screenshots from the article. After many hours navigating my way through the internet archive, I finally managed to find a copy of it, which I'll link to in the description below. I'll also leave a link to Peter's video because it's an absolutely amazing video that covers the record more so from a production perspective, which I definitely don't have the qualifications to do, so definitely check his video out. In April 2015, during a live stream, deadmau5 would link to a very old remix he did back in 2002, which prior to this stream, nobody knew was his. The song was a remix of a track called I'm Electric by a group called Revenge of the Egg People. Most importantly, this remix was credited to an alias called Karma K. This was yet another piece of proof definitively linking deadmau5 to the Karma alias from the record. On October 27, 2016, deadmau5 would make 2 tweets about the record. Responding to an article by Dancing Astronaut celebrating a decade of deadmau5, deadmau5 would write, "Matter of fact, it was actually 2000. Suck This was my first official release. Bonus points, prototype mouse head." He would provide a link to Zaffa's upload of Suck This. Minutes later, he would tweet again, saying, 17 years ago. Damn. This time, he would link to my upload of I Don't Want No Other. These tweets are very interesting because they confirm a release date for the vinyl of the year 2000. Prior to these tweets, we still had no idea about the exact release year of the vinyl, but finally we had an answer. Now, just a quick update to this video. As I was editing this video, deadmau5 began promoting his 20 years of deadmau5 set of shows on his Instagram. However, soon after this, he would upload this screenshot, claiming that he was changing the name from 20 years of deadmau5 to 25 years of deadmau5 after doing some math and figuring out the true beginnings of the deadmau5 name. In this screenshot, he claims that I Don't Want No Other was made in 1999, despite previously claiming it was made in 2000. He also claimed that the Smirnoff compilation he did was from 1998, despite this CD being rather well documented as being from 2004. When r/deadmau5 moderator Good for Josh made a comment on Reddit questioning the conflict in these dates, deadmau5 himself rather angrily responded that people should let him be the authority on when he released . So, safe to say, neither me, Good for Josh, or anyone else pushed this any further with deadmau5, and a release date of 1999 or 2000 will just have to do for now. In November of 2016, deadmau5 would keep the Dred and Karma tweets coming, sharing the following picture with the caption, "During my epic data hoard to the new NAS, I found this gem, the birth of the mouse." The picture shared is a very old version of 3D Studio Max, showing a seemingly very old project file containing that now infamous prototype mouse head design. This was now one of only 3 glimpses we had at this version of the mouse head after the vinyl and the flyer from the Instagram post, and also confirmed that deadmau5 actually designed the mouse head himself. With this post, deadmau5 wouldn't really talk about the Dred and Karma project again, at least not until 2024, but we'll come back to that. For now, let's jump back to talking about whatever happened with those lossless WAV rips. In 2021, a member of the deadmau5 community named Hydra would message me on Discord. Much like the commenters on my YouTube video, he had discovered that my supposed WAV rips of the tracks weren't true lossless WAVs, but unlike those commenters, he clearly explained why. Upon performing a spectral analysis of my track, there was a very obvious cutoff at 15 kHz. This strongly implied that, quite simply, the person who ripped the track for me at the record store didn't really know what they were doing. Hydra asked about the possibility of me re-ripping my record. I told him that I would certainly look into it, but I still didn't have the equipment to do it, and I didn't really trust any record stores to do it, assuming I could find one that offered a ripping service in the first place. Unfortunately, I really dropped the ball here because I remained unable to rip the record for many years. However, in March of 2023, Hydra would post the following in a private deadmau5 collectors Discord. Big announcement. We finally have a true lossless recording of the Dred and Karma record. Getting a lossless version of that record was one of the first searches ever started in this server, and because of that, I felt as if this should be its own big announcement, along with the fact that no one has ever publicly shared a real lossless rip of this historic record. Thank you Thermospore for the rip. So, finally, the WAV file had been ripped by an individual named Thermospore, almost exactly 10 years after the first discovery of the record. Now, the logical question you might have at this point is, if these rips were only shared in a private server, what business do I have sharing them publicly? Well, in an act of great kindness, both Hydra, the server owner, and Thermospore, the ripper of the tracks, have granted me permission to share the tracks publicly upon the release of this video. So, I'm proud to be able to share, for the first time ever, the lossless WAV rips of I Don't Want No Other and Suck This from the Dred and Karma vinyl. You can find the download link in the description of this video. I hope you enjoy being able to listen to these infamous and amazing tracks in their full glory. Anyways, to finish off this video, let's talk about deadmau5's interview with YouTuber Sean Ryan. Just earlier this year, in 2024, deadmau5 sat down to do a 4-hour podcast with Sean Ryan. At one point in the interview, deadmau5 was asked about the first song he ever put out. And perhaps surprisingly, after 10 years, deadmau5 was quite open about his Dred and Karma project.
Do you remember the first track that you put out to the public?
Yeah. It was called I Don't Want No Other. It was me working with another guy. So I used to work in a record store.
In the interview, deadmau5 revealed that he actually used to work at Play to Record, the record store that actually sold the vinyl. He revealed that DJ Dred was kind of a big deal in Niagara Falls at the time, and he knew a guy called Asim Awan. Awan ran a label called Popular Records, which had a sub-label called Awesome Records. This was the mysterious label that the vinyl was actually released on. This actually means that the information on Discogs is currently incorrect. The Awesome Records 8 label, which is said to just be a one-off label for this record, is actually the same label as Awesome Records 3, which has about 15 other releases of dance music around this time period. This also means the article we looked at before was incorrect in claiming the label belonged to Eugene Tam, who deadmau5 confirms in this interview was only involved in selling the record at the Play to Record store. deadmau5 concludes the segment by saying that the record was terrible and that he can't listen to it today. I think it's safe to say that deadmau5 is by far his own toughest critic. And with that, we have covered absolutely everything there is to know about deadmau5's elusive and mysterious first ever record. From the public being completely unaware of the record's existence prior to 2013, to deadmau5 talking about it publicly on a YouTube channel with over 2 million subscribers just earlier this year, I think we can safely say this mystery has finally been put to bed. I really hope you've enjoyed watching this video. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, and while you're at it, check out some of my other videos about other rare and obscure music topics. I've also recently opened a Discord server, where you're more than welcome to drop by and say hello. Anyways, this has been NB Duckman. Thank you so much for watching.